People reveal more than they realize. Small reactions, tone of voice, pauses, and subtle behavior often say more than words ever do. Most of the time, these signals are easy to miss. But once you notice them, they become hard to ignore. This video looks at 30 ways to better read people, understand hidden cues, and see what's happening beneath the surface of everyday interactions. If you enjoy long, thoughtful videos like this, like and subscribe to our channel Restwise. These videos take a lot of time to make, and your support helps keep the channel going. Let's begin. Microexpressions. The wordy 25-second facial clues people can't hide. You ever get that weird gut feeling about someone and you cannot explain why? They say the right words, their tone sounds normal, their smile looks polite, but something inside you whispers that something is off. Most people ignore that feeling because they assume they are overthinking. But here is the truth. Your brain is often picking up signals that your conscious mind has not processed yet. There is a tiny window of time when people reveal what they actually feel. It flashes across the face so fast that most people miss it completely. We are talking about a fraction of a second. Around 1/25th of a second. A facial expression that leaks out before the person has time to hide it. These are called microexpressions. And once you start noticing them, you will never see people the same way again. Imagine someone telling you they are happy for your success. Their words sound supportive. Their posture is relaxed. But right before they smile, their face tightens for a split second. The corners of the mouth pull back. The eyebrows pinch slightly downward. It disappears instantly, and the smile appears right after. That tiny flash could be envy. Most people miss it, but your brain might still register it subconsciously, which is why something feels strange even when everything looks fine on the surface. The reason microexpressions happen is simple. Emotion moves faster than control. Your emotional brain reacts instantly. But the part of your brain responsible for managing your image, the logical control center, takes a moment to catch up. During that tiny delay, the real emotion leaks out through the muscles in the face. Researchers studying human emotion discovered that these expressions are universal. People from completely different cultures show the same facial signals for emotions like anger, fear, disgust, sadness, happiness, surprise, and contempt. Even people who are blind from birth display these expressions naturally. That means these signals are deeply wired into human biology. And here is the shocking part. Even people who are very good at lying cannot fully stop microexpressions. They can control their words. They can control their tone. They can rehearse a story. But the face often betrays the truth for a split second. Think about an interrogation room. A suspect insists they have nothing to hide. Their voice is steady. Their explanation sounds reasonable. But when a certain question comes up, their eyebrows lift and pull together for an instant. That brief signal could indicate fear or stress connected to that topic. Now imagine how powerful that ability becomes in everyday life. You might notice a flash of contempt when someone agrees with you in a meeting. A moment of fear when you ask a simple question. A flicker of disgust when someone claims they like a person they secretly cannot stand. And suddenly conversations become much more transparent. But before you start thinking this makes you some kind of human lie detector, there is an important reality check. Microexpressions do not automatically mean someone is lying. They reveal emotion, not the full story. Someone might show fear because they feel nervous. Someone might show anger because they feel misunderstood. The expression tells you something real is happening emotionally, but it does not tell you the entire reason. This is why awareness matters more than judgment. When you catch a microexpression, treat it like a clue rather than a verdict. Your job is not to accuse people. Your job is to observe patterns. If someone consistently shows flashes of irritation when a certain subject appears, there is probably something deeper going on beneath their words. Over time, this awareness changes the way you listen to people. You stop relying only on what they say. You start noticing what their face reveals before their mind has time to edit it. And once you realize how much information leaks through the human face in less than a second, you start to understand something fascinating about human behavior. People reveal far more than they think they do. The eyes never lie, decoding eye movement and focus. Most people spend their entire lives looking at faces, but almost nobody is actually watching the eyes. And that is strange, because the eyes are one of the hardest parts of the body to control when someone is hiding something. Think about the last time you asked someone a question and they suddenly looked away. Maybe their eyes moved up for a moment. Maybe they glanced to the side before answering. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but something about it caught your attention. Most people brush that moment off, but those tiny shifts in eye movement can reveal how the mind is processing information in real time. Your eyes are deeply connected to your brain. They move in patterns depending on what your mind is doing. When someone is remembering something that actually happened, their eyes often move differently compared to when they are inventing something on the spot. It is not a magic trick, and it is not perfect every time, but the pattern shows up often enough that trained observers use it to understand what is happening inside a person's mind. Imagine asking someone what they did last weekend. If they truly remember the event, their eyes may briefly drift as their brain searches through stored memories. It is almost like their mind is flipping through old photographs. But when someone is creating a story instead of recalling one, the eye movement can look different. The brain is no longer searching a memory. It is constructing a scene that did not exist before. That difference can create a subtle shift in where the eyes go and how long they stay there. Another powerful clue is focus. People naturally look at what they are emotionally connected to. When someone is genuinely engaged in a conversation, their eyes lock in. Their attention feels present. But when a person is bored, uncomfortable, or mentally somewhere else, the eyes begin to wander. They might look past you, down at the floor, or around the room, as if their brain is trying to escape. You can see this happen in everyday situations. Picture someone saying they are very interested in what you are explaining. Their words sound supportive, but their eyes keep drifting toward the door or toward their phone. Their attention is already somewhere else. The eyes reveal where the mind actually is. There is also something fascinating about how people look at others during emotional moments. When someone feels genuine connection or attraction, eye contact tends to last longer than usual. The gaze becomes steady and warm. On the other hand, when someone feels guilt, anxiety, or discomfort, maintaining eye contact suddenly becomes harder. The eyes may break away more frequently because the brain is trying to reduce emotional pressure. But here is where things get interesting. Many people have heard the old idea that liars avoid eye contact. Because of that belief, some people who are lying will actually overcompensate. They force themselves to hold eye contact longer than normal, almost as if they are trying to prove their honesty. and that can look just as unnatural. Instead of relaxed eye contact that flows naturally during conversation, their stare becomes stiff. It lingers too long. It feels forced rather than comfortable. Your brain notices the tension even if you cannot explain why. Scientists who study human behavior often describe the eyes as an attention compass. Wherever the eyes go, the mind usually follows. If someone's gaze keeps returning to a certain person in the room, that person likely holds emotional importance. If their eyes repeatedly check a clock, their mind is thinking about time. If they keep glancing at an exit, their brain may be thinking about leaving. This is why paying attention to eye patterns can reveal motivations that words never mention. But just like with every skill in reading people, context is everything. Some people naturally avoid eye contact because of cultural habits, personality, or social anxiety. That alone does not mean they are hiding something. What matters is change. When someone's normal eye behavior suddenly shifts in a specific moment, that shift is often where the real story lies. Maybe their gaze suddenly drops when a certain name is mentioned. Maybe their eyes dart quickly before answering a question. Maybe their focus disappears the moment a particular topic comes up. Those small changes are signals from the brain. When you start observing eyes with this level of awareness, conversations begin to feel very different. You realize that communication is not just happening through words. It is happening through attention, movement, and focus that most people never consciously notice. And once you learn to watch the eyes carefully, you start seeing thoughts move across a person's face before they ever speak them out loud. The fake smile versus the real smile, spotting genuine emotion instantly. Have you ever noticed how some smiles instantly feel warm and real, while others feel strangely empty even though the person's teeth are showing and their mouth looks perfectly shaped into a smile? Nothing obvious seems wrong, yet something inside you says that it is not genuine. Most people ignore that feeling and assume they are imagining things. But your brain is actually detecting one of the most revealing signals in human behavior. Not all smiles are created by the same emotion. Some smiles are automatic social masks. Others are real emotional reactions that the body cannot fake easily. The difference between the two is surprisingly easy to see once you know where to look, and once you see it, it becomes almost impossible to miss. A genuine smile does not start with the mouth. It starts with the eyes. When someone truly feels happiness, amusement, or warmth, a group of muscles around the eyes activate automatically. The cheeks rise, the eyes narrow slightly, and tiny wrinkles appear at the outer corners. These wrinkles are often called crow's feet. They form because the muscles around the eyes contract in a natural emotional response that the brain triggers without conscious control. Psychologists often refer to this as the Duchenne smile, named after the scientist who studied how real emotion appears on the face. The key discovery was simple but powerful. The muscles around the eyes are extremely difficult to activate on command. Most people can easily force their mouth into a smile, but they cannot convincingly recreate the eye reaction that comes with genuine emotion. That means when someone fakes a smile, the mouth usually does all the work while the eyes stay strangely neutral. You have probably seen this many times without realizing it. Think about a polite customer service smile. The mouth stretches wide, the teeth show, but the eyes look tired or blank. The expression disappears the moment the interaction ends. It is a social smile, not an emotional one. Now compare that to the moment someone hears something genuinely funny. Their cheeks lift, their eyes squeeze slightly, and the whole face changes shape. Sometimes they even look away or lean forward because the emotion is flowing naturally through the body. The difference feels alive. One of the fastest ways to spot a fake smile is to watch the timing. Real smiles appear gradually and fade naturally. They grow out of the emotion that triggered them. But fake smiles often appear too quickly and disappear just as fast. It is almost like a light switch flipping on and off. Another clue is symmetry. Real emotion tends to move both sides of the face evenly. When someone forces a smile, the movement can look slightly uneven, with one side of the mouth lifting more than the other. And then there is the context. Imagine someone receiving good news they claim to be excited about. Their mouth smiles, but their eyes remain flat and unchanged. That mismatch between the words and the facial signals is often where the truth quietly slips out. The brain notices these mismatches instantly, which is why fake smiles sometimes create that uncomfortable feeling you cannot quite explain. But here is something important to understand. A fake smile does not always mean someone is trying to deceive you in a malicious way. Humans use social smiles constantly. We smile to be polite. We smile to avoid awkwardness. We smile when we want to appear friendly even if we feel neutral inside. In many situations, these smiles are simply part of normal social behavior. The real power of recognizing smile differences comes from noticing patterns. If someone consistently gives social smiles during moments where genuine emotion would normally appear, that tells you something about their true feelings. Maybe they are hiding discomfort. Maybe they feel disconnected from the situation. Maybe they are masking irritation or resentment behind a polite expression. On the other hand, when someone's smile reaches their eyes and spreads across their entire face, that reaction is extremely difficult to fake. It means the emotion is authentic and happening in the moment. This is why the eyes are often called the most honest part of the face. They reveal the emotional truth that the mouth can easily pretend. Once you train yourself to watch the eyes, instead of just the smile, you begin to notice how often people communicate emotions they never say out loud. A meeting room filled with polite smiles might actually be full of boredom or frustration. A quiet moment between friends might contain a genuine smile that says more than 100 words. And the moment you start recognizing the difference between a social smile and a real one, you gain a powerful glimpse into what people truly feel beneath the surface. Voice tone secrets. What pitch, speed, and pauses reveal. You can close your eyes during a conversation and still learn an incredible amount about what someone is really feeling. Not from their words, from their voice. Human beings focus so much on what is said that they often ignore how it is said. But the human voice carries emotional information that the brain leaks automatically. Tiny shifts in pitch, speed, and silence reveal what someone is experiencing internally, sometimes even before they realize it themselves. Think about the difference between someone calmly explaining something and someone who feels nervous while explaining the same thing. The words might be identical, but the voice tells two completely different stories. Your brain is wired to detect these differences instantly. Let us start with pitch. Pitch is simply how high or low a voice sounds. When people feel relaxed and confident, their voice tends to settle into a natural range. It flows comfortably without sharp spikes. But when someone feels anxious, stressed, or under pressure, the pitch often rises slightly without them noticing. This happens because stress activates the body's fight or flight response. The muscles around the throat tighten, breathing becomes shallower, and the vocal cords react to that tension. The result is a voice that sounds a little higher, a little tighter, sometimes even shaky. Imagine someone answering a difficult question. At first their voice is calm. Then you ask about something sensitive. Suddenly the pitch jumps upward for a moment before they finish the sentence. That tiny shift can reveal emotional pressure happening beneath the surface. Now pay attention to speed. When people feel comfortable and in control, their speech rhythm tends to be steady. They pause naturally between thoughts, and their words flow at a relaxed pace. But when the brain experiences stress or fear, something interesting happens. The mind starts racing, and the voice often tries to keep up. Speech becomes faster. Sentences start stacking on top of each other. The person may begin talking more than usual, almost like they are trying to outrun silence. This rapid speech pattern can appear when someone is nervous, defensive, or trying to convince others of something they are not fully confident about. You can see this in everyday situations. A person explaining a mistake at work might suddenly start speaking much faster than normal. They pile on extra details, explanations, and justifications. Their brain is working overtime to regain control of the situation, and the voice reflects that pressure. But the opposite can happen too. Sometimes stress slows people down instead of speeding them up. Words become hesitant. The voice pauses longer than usual as the brain carefully calculates what to say next. Those longer gaps between sentences can signal uncertainty, fear of saying the wrong thing, or an internal debate happening in real time. Which brings us to one of the most revealing parts of communication: silence. Pauses are incredibly powerful signals. A natural pause happens when someone finishes a thought and prepares the next one. It feels smooth and comfortable. But a tension pause feels different. It arrives suddenly, often right after a difficult question or sensitive topic appears. Picture asking someone a simple question. For a brief moment, nothing happens. Their voice does not respond right away. That small silence is the brain searching for the safest answer. Even a pause of 1 second can reveal that the mind is working harder than usual. Researchers studying human communication often find that people rely more on vocal tone than on the actual words when judging emotion. In other words, the brain trusts the sound of the voice more than the content of the sentence. That is why sarcasm works. Someone can say something positive with a flat or irritated tone, and everyone immediately understands the real meaning. The voice carries emotional fingerprints that words cannot hide. But just like every skill in reading people, context matters. Some people naturally speak quickly because of their personality. Others pause often because they think carefully before speaking. The key is not judging a single moment. The key is noticing change. If someone normally speaks slowly, but suddenly speeds up during a certain topic, that shift matters. If their voice becomes higher when answering a particular question, that change matters. If their pauses appear only when certain names or situations come up, the pattern begins to tell a deeper story. Over time, you start hearing conversations differently. Instead of focusing only on the message, you start listening to the rhythm beneath the message. The rise of pitch, the rush of words, the unexpected silence between sentences. And once you begin noticing what pitch, speed, and pauses reveal, you realize something fascinating. The voice often confesses emotions long before the person speaking is ready to admit them. Body language leakage. When the body reveals what words hide, you can rehearse the perfect sentence. You can control your tone. You can carefully choose every word that comes out of your mouth, but your body does not always cooperate with the story you are trying to tell. That is because the body reacts before the mind has time to manage the image you want to present. And in those small reactions, the truth often slips out. Psychologists sometimes call this body language leakage. It happens when someone tries to hide or control what they feel, but their body releases tiny signals anyway. These signals are rarely dramatic. They are subtle movements that appear for just a moment before the person regains control. But once you know what to watch for, those moments can reveal far more than words ever will. Picture someone saying they are completely relaxed about a situation. Their voice sounds calm. Their explanation seems reasonable. But while they are speaking, their foot begins bouncing against the floor. Their fingers tap the table. Their shoulders tighten slightly. Those movements are not random. When the brain experiences stress or emotional tension, the body builds up energy. That energy has to go somewhere. Often it leaks out through small restless movements. People shift in their seat. They adjust their clothing repeatedly. They rub their hands together or touch their face. These are called self-soothing behaviors. The body is literally trying to calm itself down while the person continues speaking normally. Now imagine a different scenario. Someone claims they agree with an idea during a meeting. Their words say yes, but their body leans slightly away from the group. Their arms fold across their chest. Their torso angles toward the exit. Even though the person is verbally cooperating, their body position is quietly creating distance. The human body naturally moves toward things it likes and away from things it dislikes. When someone feels comfortable and engaged, their body tends to lean forward. Their shoulders open. Their posture becomes relaxed and oriented toward the person they are interacting with. But when discomfort appears, the body begins to close off, arms cross, legs turn away. The torso rotates slightly as if preparing to leave. Sometimes this shift is so small that most people never notice it, but the brain behind the body is revealing exactly how it feels. Hands are another place where emotional leakage happens constantly. When people feel confident and secure, their hand movements are usually open and expressive. Palms appear naturally as they talk. Gestures flow with their words. But when someone feels defensive or uncertain, the hands often begin to hide. They slip into pockets. They tuck under the table. They grip objects like a glass, a pen, or a phone. It is almost as if the body is trying to protect itself without the person realizing it. One of the most interesting forms of body leakage happens with what researchers call pacifying gestures. These are small movements people make when they feel internal stress. Someone might rub the back of their neck, touch their throat, or stroke their arm. These gestures activate nerves that help calm the body. In other words, the person is unconsciously trying to soothe their own nervous system. You can see this happen right after a difficult question appears in a conversation. A person may answer confidently with their words, but at the same time their hand moves to their neck or collar as if they are trying to release tension. The words say everything is fine. The body quietly says something else is happening. But just like every skill in reading people, one signal alone is never enough to draw a conclusion. Everyone has habits. Some people cross their arms simply because they are comfortable that way. Others move their hands constantly because they are energetic speakers. The real insight comes from noticing clusters of signals and sudden changes. If someone normally sits relaxed but suddenly begins tapping their foot, hiding their hands, and leaning away when a certain topic appears. That combination of signals tells you the topic is creating emotional pressure. The body rarely leaks just one clue. It often releases several at the same time. Once you start observing these patterns, you begin to realize something fascinating about human behavior. People are constantly managing the story they tell with their words. But the body operates on a different level. It responds to emotion instantly, long before the mind has time to polish the message. And in those small unconscious movements, the body often reveals the feelings that words are working very hard to hide. Hand gestures that expose confidence, anxiety, or deception. Watch someone's hands during a conversation, and you will start noticing something fascinating. The hands often reveal emotional states that the face and voice are trying to keep under control. Most people focus on facial expressions, but the hands are constantly moving, adjusting, reacting, and signaling what the brain is feeling in real time. The reason is simple. Hands are deeply connected to how humans express emotion and intention. Long before language existed, humans used gestures to communicate. That instinct never disappeared. Even today, the brain naturally pushes emotion through the hands, which is why people gesture when they talk, even if nobody is looking. And when someone tries to control their behavior or hide what they feel, the hands are often the first place where the pressure leaks out. Think about what confident people look like when they speak. Their hands tend to move openly. Their gestures are visible, relaxed, and natural. You often see their palms while they explain something. The movement feels fluid, almost like their hands are helping carry the message forward. Open palms have a powerful psychological effect. Throughout human history, showing the palms signaled that someone was not holding a weapon and had nothing to hide. Because of that ancient instinct, open hand gestures still communicate honesty and confidence on a subconscious level. When someone speaks with their palms occasionally visible and their gestures flowing with their words, the brain reading those signals often interprets the person as transparent and comfortable. Now compare that to what happens when someone feels anxious. The hands begin to behave very differently. Instead of moving freely, they start searching for something to do. Fingers rub together. A pen gets clicked repeatedly. A glass is picked up and set down over and over again. The person might start touching their watch, adjusting their sleeve, or fidgeting with objects on the table. These small repetitive movements are the body's attempt to release nervous energy. When the brain experiences stress, the body builds tension. Since the person is trying to stay socially composed, that tension often escapes through subtle hand activity. The hands become a pressure valve for the nervous system. Another interesting signal appears when someone suddenly hides their hands. During relaxed conversation, people usually keep their hands visible without thinking about it. But when a sensitive topic appears, the hands may slip under the table, tuck into pockets, or fold tightly against the body. It is almost like the brain is trying to remove them from view. That shift alone does not mean someone is lying, but it often signals that the person has become more guarded. The body is instinctively protecting itself while the mind carefully chooses words. One gesture that often gets attention in behavioral studies is what people call the steeple. This happens when someone lightly presses their fingertips together while speaking, creating a shape that looks like a small triangle with their hands. You often see this gesture in people who feel confident about what they are saying. Leaders, lawyers, and experienced speakers sometimes use it naturally because it reflects internal certainty. The hands remain calm, controlled, and balanced. But there is another pattern that can reveal emotional discomfort. When someone repeatedly brings their hands to their face, especially around the mouth or nose, it can signal internal stress. The brain is activating pacifying gestures again. Touching the face can stimulate nerves that help calm the body during tension. For example, imagine someone answering a difficult question. As they explain their answer, their fingers briefly touch the side of their nose or cover the corner of their mouth. That movement might last less than a second, but it reveals the nervous system reacting to pressure. There is also something called gesture mismatch. This happens when the hands tell a different story than the words. Imagine someone saying they feel very confident about a decision, but their hands remain tightly clasped together as if holding themselves still. Or they claim they are relaxed, yet their fingers continue tapping rapidly against the table. When words and gestures move in opposite directions, the brain observing those signals often senses that something does not fully align. But just like every skill in reading people, context matters more than any single gesture. Some people naturally talk with their hands a lot, while others barely gesture at all. The key is noticing shifts in behavior. If someone who normally gestures freely suddenly locks their hands together when a certain topic appears, that change carries meaning. If a calm speaker suddenly starts fidgeting with objects during one particular question, that moment deserves attention. The hands are constantly broadcasting emotional information that most people never notice. They move when confidence rises. They tighten when anxiety appears. They hide when someone feels guarded. And once you begin watching hand gestures closely, you realize something powerful about human communication. Even when the mind carefully edits the message, the hands are still quietly telling the story underneath. The power of silence. What people reveal when they stop talking. Most people think communication only happens when someone is speaking. Words, explanations, opinions, stories. That is what we are trained to focus on. But some of the most revealing moments in human behavior happen when the words suddenly stop. Silence is uncomfortable for a lot of people. When a conversation pauses, the brain often rushes to fill that empty space as quickly as possible. We add extra details, explain things we were not asked to explain, or start talking just to avoid the tension of quiet. But when someone stops talking unexpectedly, something interesting is usually happening inside their mind. Silence can expose hesitation, conflict, fear, or deep thought. And the way a person handles silence often tells you more than the sentences they were about to say. Imagine asking someone a direct question. Nothing aggressive, just something simple and clear. Instead of answering immediately, they pause. Not a natural pause where someone gathers their thoughts, a longer pause where their mind seems to be calculating something. In that moment, the brain is working harder than usual. When people know the answer to a question and feel comfortable sharing it, the response usually comes quickly. But when the question touches something sensitive, the mind begins scanning for the safest possible response. That search process creates silence. Even a pause of 2 or 3 seconds can reveal that the person is weighing options inside their head. Now picture a different situation. Someone is explaining a story, and everything flows smoothly until a certain detail appears. Suddenly, they stop mid-sentence. Their words hang in the air for a moment before they continue. That break in rhythm is rarely random. Our brains organize speech like a flowing pattern. When that pattern suddenly breaks, it often means the mind hit something unexpected. Maybe they realized they said too much. Maybe they are deciding whether to reveal the next part. Maybe they are adjusting the story before continuing. The silence marks the moment where their brains stepped in to edit what happens next. Silence also reveals emotional reactions that words might hide. Imagine telling someone important news. For a moment they say nothing at all. Their face stays still. Their body freezes slightly as they process what they just heard. That quiet moment can be incredibly revealing. When people feel surprised, shocked, or deeply affected by something, the brain sometimes pauses speech completely while it processes the emotion. The mind needs a second to catch up with what just happened. During that silence, their true reaction often appears in subtle ways. Their eyes widen slightly, their shoulders shift, their breathing changes. All of this happens before they decide what words to use. There is another fascinating thing about silence in conversations. Many people feel an intense urge to break it. If you ask a question and then remain quiet, the other person often feels pressure to keep talking. They might add extra information they never planned to reveal. Investigators and skilled interviewers sometimes use this technique deliberately. Instead of jumping in with another question, they simply stay silent. That silence invites the other person to fill the space, and in doing so, they often say far more than they intended. The brain dislikes unresolved gaps in conversation. Silence can also signal emotional withdrawal. When someone suddenly stops contributing to a conversation they were actively part of, it can mean their internal state has shifted. Maybe they feel offended. Maybe they lost interest. Maybe something said triggered discomfort. Instead of arguing or expressing the emotion directly, their mind chooses quiet distance. You might notice their responses becoming shorter. One-word answers replace full sentences. Eventually, they stop speaking altogether while the conversation continues around them. The absence of words becomes its own message. But just like every signal in human behavior, silence needs context. Some people are naturally quiet thinkers. Others pause often because they process information carefully before responding. Those patterns alone do not mean anything negative. What matters is the change. If someone normally responds quickly, but suddenly becomes silent when a certain topic appears, that shift is meaningful. If their voice was flowing easily and then stops the moment a specific question arrives, the pause itself becomes a clue. Human communication is not just built from words. It is built from rhythm, timing, emotion, and the space between sentences. And sometimes the most honest part of a conversation is not what someone says. It is the moment when they stop talking. Foot and leg positioning, the most honest part of body language. If you really want to know how someone feels in a conversation, stop staring at their face for a moment and look down at their feet. It sounds strange at first, but the feet and legs are often the most honest part of the human body. While people carefully control their facial expressions and choose their words with precision, very few people think about managing what their feet are doing. And because of that, the lower half of the body often reveals intentions and emotions long before the upper half does. The reason is simple. The brain directs the body toward what it wants and away from what it wants to escape. That instinct is ancient. Long before humans had complex language, the body relied on movement to approach safety and avoid danger. Those instincts still guide our physical behavior today, even in everyday conversations. Imagine two people standing and talking at a gathering. Their faces are turned toward each other, and the conversation sounds friendly. But if you glance down, you might notice that one person's feet are pointed slightly toward the door. That small detail matters. The direction of the feet often reveals where the mind actually wants to go. When someone feels engaged and comfortable, their feet naturally point toward the person they are interacting with. Their stance aligns with the conversation, but when their interest drops or they feel the urge to leave, the feet may quietly rotate toward an exit or another person in the room. The upper body stays polite. The feet start preparing to escape. You can see this happen all the time in social situations. Someone might be nodding and smiling during a conversation, but their legs slowly angle away from the interaction. It is almost like the body is halfway out the door while the words are still trying to be courteous. Leg positioning also reveals comfort and confidence. When people feel relaxed, their stance tends to open naturally. Their legs remain steady and balanced. They shift weight occasionally, but without tension. But when anxiety or discomfort appears, the legs often react quickly. Someone might begin shifting their weight repeatedly from one foot to the other. Their knee may start bouncing if they are sitting. Their feet tap against the floor in a steady rhythm. These movements are subtle forms of emotional release. When the brain experiences stress, the body builds internal energy. Just like restless hand movements, leg and foot activity can act as a pressure valve for that tension. The person might not even notice they are doing it, but their nervous system is trying to calm itself through movement. Another powerful signal appears when people suddenly cross their legs or tightly lock their ankles. This can sometimes indicate that the person is becoming more guarded or protective. It is a physical way of closing off space around the body. Imagine someone sitting comfortably with both feet on the floor during a relaxed discussion. Then a difficult question appears, and suddenly their legs cross tightly or their ankles hook together. That shift often signals a change in emotional comfort. The body is responding before the mind finishes crafting its verbal response. Feet also reveal excitement and anticipation in interesting ways. When someone hears good news or feels eager about something, their feet may become more animated. They might bounce lightly, shift forward in their seat, or reposition their legs closer to the person they are engaged with. The body literally leans into the moment. But just like every skill in reading people, no single gesture tells the full story. Some people cross their legs simply because it feels comfortable. Others tap their feet out of habit or energy. The key is not judging isolated movements. The real insight comes from noticing changes. If someone's feet were pointed toward you during a conversation and suddenly turn toward the exit, when a certain topic appears, that change matters. If their legs were relaxed but suddenly begin bouncing rapidly during a specific question, that shift tells you the topic created tension. The lower body rarely participates in the careful social performance that happens above the waist. People train themselves to manage their facial expressions, their tone, and their posture, but the feet often operate on pure instinct. They quietly follow the direction of attention, interest, and emotional comfort. And once you begin paying attention to where someone's feet are pointing and how their legs respond during a conversation, you start noticing something fascinating. The part of the body most people ignore is often the part telling the most honest story. Personal space, how distance reveals comfort, attraction, or threat, Pay attention to how close someone chooses to stand next to you, and you will start noticing a silent language most people never talk about. Humans are constantly adjusting distance during interactions, and those tiny shifts reveal powerful information about comfort, trust, attraction, and even hidden tension. The strange part is that almost nobody is consciously aware they are doing it. Your brain has an invisible boundary around your body called personal space. It acts like a psychological bubble that protects you from discomfort. When someone you trust enters that space, your brain usually stays calm. But when someone you do not feel comfortable with steps too close, the body reacts instantly. Your muscles tighten slightly. Your attention sharpens. You might lean back, step away, or angle your body to restore distance. This reaction is not random. It is an ancient survival system built into human behavior. Long before modern society existed, physical distance helped people evaluate whether someone was safe or dangerous. That instinct still operates today, even in ordinary conversations. Imagine two friends meeting after a long time apart. They stand close, maybe even shoulder to shoulder. Their bodies relax because the brain recognizes the other person as safe and familiar. The distance between them feels natural. Now picture a different situation. Someone you barely know steps very close while talking. Instinctively, you might shift your weight backward or take a small step away. You probably do it without thinking. Your brain simply wants to reestablish the comfortable boundary. That movement is the body protecting its psychological space. Researchers who study human interaction often describe different zones of personal space. There is the intimate zone, which is reserved for close relationships like family, partners, or very trusted friends. When someone enters this space, it signals emotional closeness or attraction. Then there is the personal zone, which is comfortable for casual conversations with friends or colleagues. Most everyday social interactions happen within this range. Beyond that is the social zone, where people maintain a bit more distance, such as during formal discussions, presentations, or interactions with strangers. These zones are not strict measurements. They shift depending on culture, personality, and context. But the emotional meaning behind them remains powerful. For example, when two people feel strong attraction, they naturally reduce distance without planning it. Their bodies lean slightly closer during conversation. They find reasons to step within each other's personal space. The closeness feels easy and comfortable. You might notice their shoulders gradually turning toward each other, their feet pointing inward, and the gap between them shrinking as the interaction continues. Their brains are signaling trust and curiosity. The opposite pattern happens when someone feels uncomfortable or threatened. The body begins creating distance. A person might lean back while sitting, step sideways during conversation, or place objects between themselves and the other person. Even something simple like holding a bag or a drink in front of the body can create a small barrier that restores a sense of safety. Sometimes this distancing behavior happens so subtly that only careful observers notice it. Two people may continue speaking politely, but one person slowly increases the space between them with each shift of their feet. The words remain friendly. The distance quietly tells another story. Distance can also reveal social hierarchy and confidence. People who feel secure and comfortable in their position tend to hold their ground during interactions. They stand where they are without constantly adjusting their position. But someone who feels intimidated or uncertain may retreat slightly when the other person steps forward. Their body creates extra space as a protective response. Even seating choices can reveal these dynamics. When given a choice, people usually sit closer to those they feel comfortable with and farther away from those they feel uncertain about. The mind calculates these decisions instantly, without conscious thought. Of course, personal space is influenced by culture and personality. Some cultures naturally prefer closer conversation distances, while others maintain wider gaps. Some individuals simply enjoy more space than others. That alone does not mean attraction or discomfort. What matters most is change. If someone starts a conversation standing comfortably near you, but gradually steps back when a certain topic appears, that shift carries meaning. If they begin at a polite distance, but slowly move closer as the interaction continues, it often signals growing comfort or interest. Human beings are constantly negotiating space without speaking about it. Our bodies move closer to what feels safe, interesting, or attractive. They create distance from what feels stressful, unfamiliar, or threatening. And once you start paying attention to these invisible boundaries during conversations, you realize something fascinating. The space between people often communicates emotions that words never reveal. Baseline behavior. The golden rule before judging anyone. One of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to read others is jumping to conclusions too quickly. They notice one nervous gesture, one strange pause, or one moment of eye contact breaking, and suddenly they believe they have uncovered the truth about that person. But human behavior does not work like that. Before you can accurately read anyone, you need to understand one critical principle. You must first know what normal looks like for that person. Without that reference point, every signal becomes meaningless. This is what behavioral experts call baseline behavior. A baseline is simply the way someone naturally acts when they are relaxed, comfortable, and not under pressure. It is their default pattern of speaking, moving, and reacting. Every person has their own version of normal, and it can be completely different from someone else's. Some people naturally talk fast. Others speak slowly and pause often. Some people gesture constantly with their hands. Others barely move while they speak. None of these behaviors mean anything suspicious on their own. They are simply part of that person's baseline. Imagine meeting someone for the first time. During your conversation, you notice they avoid eye contact quite a bit. If you immediately assume they are hiding something, you might be completely wrong. That person might simply be shy, introverted, or raised in a culture where direct eye contact feels disrespectful. Without knowing their usual behavior, you have no way to interpret the signal accurately. But now imagine you have spent time observing this person in relaxed situations. You notice that when they talk about ordinary topics, they maintain comfortable eye contact and their body language is open. Their voice flows smoothly and their hands gesture naturally. That is their baseline. Now suppose you ask them about a specific event, and suddenly their behavior changes. Their eyes begin darting away more frequently. Their hands stop moving and tuck under the table. Their speech becomes slower and more cautious. That shift is what matters. Reading people is not about spotting isolated signals. It is about noticing deviations from normal patterns. When someone moves away from their baseline, it often means something inside them has changed emotionally. Think of it like monitoring the weather. A sudden storm only makes sense if you know what the sky looked like before the clouds arrived. Baseline behavior also helps you avoid one of the biggest traps in interpreting body language. The trap of universal assumptions. For example, many people believe crossed arms automatically mean someone is defensive. But that is not always true. Some people cross their arms simply because it feels comfortable or helps them stay warm in a cold room. If that person always sits with crossed arms, then that posture is part of their baseline and tells you nothing about their emotional state. However, if someone who normally sits with open posture suddenly crosses their arms tightly during a certain topic, that change becomes meaningful. The brain often signals discomfort through shifts in behavior rather than through completely new actions. Another place where baseline becomes incredibly important is vocal behavior. Some people naturally pause before answering questions because they like to think carefully. Others respond immediately without hesitation. If someone who usually answers quickly suddenly starts pausing for several seconds before responding to a specific question, that difference might signal internal conflict or pressure. The baseline gives you the comparison that turns ordinary behavior into useful information. Establishing a baseline is actually very simple. You observe the person during neutral topics and relaxed moments. Ask about everyday things like hobbies, favorite food, or normal daily routines. During those moments, the brain is not under emotional pressure, so the person behaves naturally. You watch how they speak, how often they gesture, how steady their voice is, how they hold eye contact. Those patterns become your reference point. Once that reference exists, the real signals become much easier to see. A shift in posture, a change in vocal tone, a sudden increase in fidgeting. These changes stand out clearly because you already know what their normal behavior looks like. Without a baseline, reading people becomes guesswork. With a baseline, small behavioral changes start telling a meaningful story. Human behavior is incredibly complex. Everyone carries different habits, personalities, and cultural influences into every interaction. That is why the smartest observers never rush to judge a single signal. They watch for patterns. They establish normal first. Then they pay attention to what changes. Because when someone moves away from their natural baseline, that is often the moment when the real emotion underneath begins to surface. Emotional masking. When someone is pretending to feel something, you have probably experienced this moment before. Someone reacts to something in a way that feels slightly off. They smile when they should be excited, but the energy is missing. They sound supportive, yet something about their reaction feels hollow. Nothing obvious is wrong, but your instinct quietly tells you that the emotion you are seeing is not the real one. That feeling usually appears when someone is wearing an emotional mask. Humans do this all the time. We pretend to feel things we do not actually feel, or we hide emotions that we believe would cause conflict, embarrassment, or judgment. It is a social survival skill. From childhood we learn when it is safer to show certain emotions, and when it is better to cover them up. But the problem with emotional masking is that it is incredibly difficult to perform perfectly. The brain can control words and even force certain facial expressions, but genuine emotion affects the entire body. It influences the voice, posture, timing, and tiny reactions that happen automatically. When someone is pretending to feel something, these signals often stop matching each other. That mismatch is where the mask begins to slip. Imagine someone receiving praise for a project they worked on. They quickly smile and say thank you, but their shoulders stay stiff and their voice sounds flat. The smile appears, but the rest of the body does not follow the same emotional pattern. Real happiness usually spreads through the body. The voice becomes brighter. The eyes engage. The posture relaxes. When only one piece of that reaction appears, it can signal that the emotion is being performed rather than experienced. Timing is another place where emotional masking often reveals itself. Genuine emotions happen instantly because they are reactions. If something surprises you, your face responds before you even think about it. If something makes you laugh, the reaction bursts out naturally. But when someone is pretending, there is often a slight delay. The brain needs time to calculate what the appropriate reaction should be. That tiny pause between the event and the emotional display can reveal that the response was constructed rather than spontaneous. You might notice someone hearing good news and reacting half a second later with an enthusiastic response that feels slightly rehearsed. The emotion arrived after the thinking. Another clue appears when the intensity of the reaction does not match the situation. Sometimes people exaggerate emotions to make them look believable. They laugh louder than necessary, show excitement that feels slightly forced, or express sympathy in a way that seems overly dramatic. The brain sometimes believes that making the emotion bigger will make it appear more convincing. Ironically, that extra effort can create the opposite effect. The body has natural emotional rhythms. When someone exaggerates those rhythms, the reaction can feel out of sync with the moment. It becomes performance rather than response. One of the most revealing places to observe emotional masking is in disagreements or uncomfortable conversations. People often pretend to stay calm when they are actually irritated or hurt. Their words remain polite, but small signals start appearing. The jaw tightens slightly. The lips press together between sentences. Their hands become still instead of relaxed. The voice remains controlled, but carries a subtle edge of tension. The mask says everything is fine. The body quietly shows that something else is happening underneath. But here is something important to understand. Emotional masking does not automatically mean someone is dishonest or manipulative. In many situations, it is simply a way of protecting relationships. People hide disappointment to avoid hurting someone's feelings. They pretend to enjoy a gift to show appreciation. They act calm during stressful situations to maintain professionalism. Masks are part of social life. The key difference is whether the mask is temporary or constant. When someone occasionally hides an emotion for a social reason, it usually appears briefly and then fades. But when someone consistently masks their real feelings, the mismatches between words, tone, and body language start appearing more frequently. Over time, those small inconsistencies form patterns. You begin noticing that their reactions often feel delayed. Their smiles appear without the rest of the emotional signals. Their tone and posture do not match the message they are delivering. The mind might be performing the emotion, but the body is still reacting to the truth underneath. Once you become aware of emotional masking, conversations start to feel very different. You begin noticing not just the emotion someone shows, but the harmony between their face, voice, timing, and movement. And when those pieces stop aligning perfectly, it often means you are looking at a carefully constructed emotion rather than the one that actually exists beneath the surface. The mismatch principle. When words and body language don't align, most people believe the truth lies inside the words someone says. If the sentence sounds convincing, they assume the message must be honest. But human communication does not work that way. In reality, words are only one small piece of the entire signal a person sends. The real story often appears when the words and the body start telling two different stories. This is what behavioral experts call a mismatch. It happens when verbal communication says one thing, while the body language, tone, or timing quietly reveals something else. And once you learn to spot these mismatches, you begin noticing them everywhere. Imagine someone saying they are perfectly fine with a decision that was made. The sentence sounds calm and cooperative. But as they say it, their arms fold tightly across their chest and their shoulders lean slightly away from the conversation. The words say agreement. The body signals resistance. Your brain notices this conflict instantly, even if you cannot explain why the moment feels uncomfortable. Human beings are extremely sensitive to consistency. When everything lines up, when the words, voice, facial expression, and posture all move together, the message feels natural. But when one piece drifts away from the others, the brain begins searching for the reason behind the contradiction. That tension between signals is the mismatch principle. One of the most common examples happens with the word yes. Someone might verbally agree with something, but their head subtly shakes side to side while they speak. It can be very small, almost invisible, yet the movement contradicts the word they are saying. Another example appears when someone claims to feel relaxed, but their hands grip tightly together or their legs bounce with restless energy. The sentence says calm. The body reveals tension. These mismatches do not always mean someone is lying. Sometimes they simply reveal internal conflict. A person might want to agree with something logically, but emotionally they still feel uneasy. Their words express the decision they think they should make, while their body reflects the emotion they have not fully resolved. The mind and the body are briefly out of sync. Facial expressions often expose this type of conflict very quickly. Imagine someone saying they are happy for a friend's success. The sentence sounds supportive, but their smile appears for only a second before disappearing. Their eyes do not engage with the smile, and the rest of the face stays neutral. That quick flash of emotion followed by a forced expression can create a subtle mismatch. Timing also plays a big role in detecting these signals. When emotions are genuine, the body and the words usually appear at the same time. Someone hears good news, and their face lights up instantly while their voice follows with excitement. But when someone is performing an emotion, the order often changes. The words arrive first, and the expression appears slightly afterward, as if the brain remembered to add it. That small delay can reveal that the reaction was constructed rather than spontaneous. The voice can also create powerful mismatches. Imagine someone saying they are thrilled about an opportunity, but their tone sounds flat and slow. The sentence communicates excitement, yet the vocal energy does not support it. Your brain hears the enthusiasm in the words, but senses the lack of emotion in the voice. Another interesting place mismatches appear is in body orientation. A person may claim they are fully engaged in a conversation, yet their feet point toward the exit, or their torso angles slightly away from the group. Their posture suggests they are already preparing to leave. The body is moving in a different direction than the message. The most important rule when observing mismatches is not to jump to conclusions immediately. A single mismatch does not automatically prove deception. Human beings are complex, and sometimes emotions overlap in confusing ways. Someone might smile while feeling nervous. They might say something positive while internally feeling uncertain. The key is watching for patterns. If the same mismatch appears repeatedly around a certain topic or person, That pattern becomes meaningful. Words consistently moving in one direction, while the body moves in another, often signal that the person is experiencing emotions they are not openly expressing. The mind is trying to manage the message. The body is revealing the tension underneath. When you start noticing these contradictions, conversations begin to feel very different. You stop listening only to the sentences and start observing the entire communication system. The voice, the posture, the timing, the gestures. Because when those pieces align, the message feels authentic. And when they do not align, the gap between them often reveals the truth hiding underneath the words. Stress signals tiny behaviors that show internal pressure. Pressure leaves fingerprints on the human body. Not dramatic ones that people easily notice, but tiny behaviors that appear for a moment and then disappear. Most people miss them because they happen so quickly and seem meaningless on the surface. But once you learn to recognize them, they become some of the clearest signs that someone is feeling internal stress. The interesting thing about stress is that the body reacts before the mind has time to manage the reaction. When the brain senses pressure, uncertainty, or fear, it activates the nervous system almost instantly. Heart rate increases, muscles tighten, breathing changes. All of this happens automatically, without asking permission from the person experiencing it. And that internal pressure needs somewhere to go. This is why the body often releases stress through small, repetitive behaviors. Someone might rub the back of their neck while answering a difficult question. Another person might press their lips together tightly between sentences. Someone else might suddenly begin adjusting their clothing, their watch, or the collar of their shirt. These actions are not random habits. They are what psychologists often call pacifying behaviors. The body is literally trying to calm itself down. There are sensitive nerve areas around the neck, face, and hands that help regulate the nervous system. When people touch these areas during moments of tension, it can create a soothing effect that reduces the body's stress response. The person may not even realize they are doing it, but their nervous system is searching for relief. Think about how often people touch their neck during uncomfortable conversations. Fingers might briefly rub the side of the neck or adjust the collar. That area contains nerves that connect closely to emotional regulation. When tension rises, the hand moves there almost automatically. Another common signal appears around the mouth. When people feel pressure, their lips often tighten, press together, or briefly disappear inward. This reaction happens because the body instinctively tries to control emotional leakage through facial muscles. It is like the brain is saying, "Hold everything in." You might also notice people covering their mouth with their hand for a brief moment while speaking. This can sometimes happen when the brain is experiencing internal conflict about what is being said. Breathing patterns can reveal stress as well. When people feel relaxed, breathing tends to remain steady and natural. But when tension rises, the breathing rhythm can become faster or more shallow. The chest might rise more quickly, and the person may occasionally take a deeper breath as if trying to reset their system. That sudden deeper inhale is often the body attempting to stabilize itself. Hands are another place where stress signals frequently appear. Fingers may rub together repeatedly, crack knuckles, or grip objects tightly. A person might begin tapping their fingers against a table or rubbing their palms together as if warming them. These movements release nervous energy building inside the body. Legs and feet can reveal the same pressure. Someone might begin bouncing their knee rapidly while sitting. Their foot might tap the floor in a steady rhythm that continues without them noticing. These movements act like small pressure valves, releasing tension through motion. The fascinating part is how quickly these signals can appear and disappear. You might ask a simple question and see a brief lip press, a neck touch, or a quick adjustment of clothing. Then the person continues speaking normally as if nothing happened, but the body already reacted to the moment. This does not mean the person is lying or hiding something specific. Stress signals only reveal that internal pressure exists. The cause could be many things. Maybe the topic is sensitive. Maybe they are afraid of being misunderstood. Maybe they simply feel nervous about the conversation itself. The body reacts to emotional pressure in the same way regardless of the exact reason. This is why context and patterns matter so much. A single stress signal does not tell you the full story, but when several signals appear together during a specific topic or question, it often means that moment triggered something emotionally significant. You might see the person touch their neck, press their lips together, and shift their posture all within a few seconds. Those combined reactions create a clearer picture of internal tension. Over time, learning to notice these signals changes the way you observe people. Conversations stop being just about words. They become a blend of language and physiology, where the nervous system quietly participates in every interaction. Because no matter how carefully someone chooses their words, the body still responds honestly to pressure. And those small, almost invisible behaviors often reveal when someone is carrying far more tension inside than they are willing to say out loud. Dominance, submission cues in everyday interactions. Walk into any room where people are interacting, and you will notice something subtle happening beneath the conversation. Even when nobody is openly competing or arguing, there is a quiet negotiation of status taking place. Small behaviors reveal who feels confident, who feels uncertain, and who is unconsciously adjusting their position in the social hierarchy. These signals are not about power in a dramatic sense. They are everyday dominance and submission cues that appear in normal interactions at work, in social groups, and even among friends. And most people display them without realizing it. Dominance in body language usually appears through expansion. When someone feels confident, comfortable, or socially secure, their body naturally takes up more space. Their posture opens up, their shoulders remain relaxed and broad. Their gestures move freely instead of staying close to the body. This physical expansion sends a powerful message to the people around them. It signals that the person feels safe and in control of their environment. You might notice this when someone sits in a meeting with their arms resting comfortably on the table, leaning back slightly while speaking. Their movements are calm and deliberate. They are not rushing or shrinking themselves to fit into the space. Confidence tends to slow the body down. Speech patterns often reflect the same dynamic. People who feel dominant or secure in a situation usually speak at a steady pace. They pause naturally between sentences without rushing to fill silence. They do not feel the need to prove themselves quickly because they already feel comfortable holding the floor. Their voice carries patience. Now look at the opposite pattern. Submission cues often appear through contraction. When someone feels uncertain, intimidated, or socially lower in a particular moment, the body tends to make itself smaller. Shoulders roll slightly inward, arms stay closer to the torso. The person might sit on the edge of their chair rather than settling fully into it. It is almost like the body is trying not to occupy too much space. These signals are not necessarily signs of weakness. They are adaptive responses. The brain constantly reads social environments and adjusts behavior to maintain harmony or avoid conflict. Sometimes reducing physical presence is the brain's way of staying safe within a group dynamic. Eye behavior can reveal these patterns clearly. A person displaying confident dominance often maintains steady but relaxed eye contact. Their gaze does not dart around the room looking for approval. They look directly at the person they are speaking with, then naturally glance away before returning. The eye contact feels balanced. But when someone feels submissive or uncertain, their gaze may drop more frequently. They might look down, glance away quickly, or scan the room as if searching for reassurance from others. The brain is unconsciously checking the environment for social feedback. Another revealing place to watch is interruption patterns. In conversations where dominance cues appear, people who feel higher status often interrupt more freely. They jump into the conversation without waiting for long openings. Meanwhile, people displaying submission cues often wait carefully for their turn to speak. They may even stop mid-sentence if someone else begins talking. The body language of movement tells the same story. Dominant individuals often move at their own pace. They walk steadily without rushing. They take time when entering a room or approaching a group. Their movements suggest they expect the environment to adjust around them. Someone feeling less secure might move more cautiously. Their steps may become quicker or slightly hesitant, especially when approaching a group conversation. They are adjusting their rhythm to match the social environment. But here is something important to remember. Dominance and submission cues are not permanent personality traits. They shift constantly depending on context. A person might display strong confidence among close friends, but show more reserved signals during an important meeting. Someone who leads confidently at work might become quieter and more relaxed within their family. Human behavior adapts to the situation. This is why observing these signals is not about labeling people as dominant or submissive individuals. It is about understanding how people respond to the dynamics around them. When someone spreads out comfortably, speaks calmly, and holds relaxed eye contact, they are likely feeling secure in that moment. When someone shrinks their posture, limits their gestures, or hesitates before speaking, it often signals that the social pressure in that situation feels higher. These signals are subtle but powerful. They reveal how people perceive their position within the interaction happening right in front of you. And once you start noticing how posture, space, eye contact, and movement quietly communicate confidence or caution, you realize that every conversation contains a silent layer of negotiation happening beneath the words. Hidden anger, subtle signs someone is internally frustrated. Anger is one of the most powerful emotions the human brain experiences, but it is also one of the emotions people try hardest to hide. In many social situations, showing anger openly can damage relationships, create conflict, or make someone appear unprofessional. So instead of expressing it directly, people often try to suppress it. But the body is not very good at hiding anger completely. Even when someone is doing their best to stay calm, the nervous system is still reacting to the frustration inside. Muscles tighten, breathing changes, and small signals start leaking through behavior. These signals are usually subtle, but once you know what to look for, they become surprisingly clear. One of the first places hidden anger appears is the jaw. When people feel irritation building, the jaw muscles often tighten without them realizing it. The teeth may press together slightly, or the jawline may become more rigid than usual. Sometimes you will see a person briefly clench their jaw between sentences before continuing the conversation. It is the body holding tension. Lips can reveal the same pressure. Someone experiencing internal frustration might press their lips together into a thin line for a moment. The mouth closes firmly, as if trying to keep something from coming out. This reaction is the brain attempting to control emotional expression. You may also notice very small changes in breathing. Anger activates the body's fight response, which increases physical readiness. Breathing can become slightly deeper or more forceful, especially through the nose. The chest may rise more noticeably as the body prepares for action, even though the person remains seated or still. The voice can carry traces of this tension as well. A person trying to hide frustration often keeps their words polite, but their tone becomes tighter. The rhythm of their speech may become shorter and more clipped. Sentences lose some of their natural flow and start sounding more controlled. Instead of relaxed conversation, the voice begins to sound like someone carefully managing their reactions. Another interesting signal appears in the eyes. When someone is internally irritated, their eye contact patterns can change. They might hold eye contact slightly longer than normal in a way that feels intense, or they may briefly look away as if trying to calm themselves. Sometimes the eyelids narrow slightly, not enough to appear like a full glare, but enough to create a sharper expression. Hands also reveal hidden anger through restrained movement. Instead of expressive gestures, the hands may become still or tightly controlled. Fingers might press into the palm or grip objects a little more firmly than usual. You might notice someone holding a pen tightly or resting their hands on a table with unusual tension. These are small signs of the body containing energy that wants to be released. Posture often changes in subtle ways too. The shoulders may lift slightly or become rigid. The torso might lean forward just a little, signaling readiness or challenge, even though the person continues speaking calmly. The body is preparing for confrontation while the mind continues managing the conversation. Sometimes hidden anger appears through micro-reactions. A quick eye roll that disappears instantly. A brief tightening around the nose. A short exhale through the nose after hearing something irritating. These reactions can last less than a second, but they reveal the emotional response before the brain suppresses it. One of the clearest clues comes from behavioral contrast. When someone suddenly becomes much quieter than usual after a frustrating comment, that silence can signal that they are actively controlling their reaction. The mind is pressing down on the emotional brake, but just like every signal in reading people, one isolated sign does not tell the whole story. Someone might clench their jaw because they are concentrating. They might press their lips together simply out of habit. The real insight comes from clusters and timing. If several of these signals appear together right after a specific comment or situation, it often means something triggered frustration beneath the surface. You might see the jaw tighten, the lips press together, and the voice become shorter all within a few seconds. Those combined signals reveal internal pressure building under the calm exterior. Hidden anger is fascinating because it shows the constant battle between emotion and social control. The emotional brain reacts instantly, preparing the body for confrontation. The thinking brain steps in just as quickly, trying to maintain composure and keep the interaction civil. For a moment, both systems are active at the same time. And during that moment, the body often reveals frustration that the person is trying very hard not to show. Curiosity signals. How to tell when someone is truly interested. You can tell a lot about someone by watching how their body reacts when a topic truly captures their attention. Curiosity has a very distinct physical signature. When the brain becomes interested in something, the entire body subtly shifts toward that source of information. It is almost like the person is being pulled closer by invisible strings. Most people think interest is shown through words like "that sounds interesting" or "tell me more." But real curiosity rarely begins with language. It begins with small behavioral changes that happen before the person even realizes they are reacting. One of the clearest signals appears in body orientation. When someone is genuinely interested in what you are saying, their body naturally turns toward you. Not just their face, but their shoulders, torso, and even their feet begin aligning in your direction. This shift happens because the brain wants to focus its attention fully on the source of information. The body literally points toward what the mind wants more of. Leaning is another powerful clue. When curiosity rises, people tend to lean slightly forward. It is a subtle movement, but it shows engagement. The person is closing the physical distance between themselves and the conversation. Think about how people sit during a boring lecture. Many lean back, cross their arms, or shift around in their seat. But when something suddenly becomes fascinating, their posture often changes instantly. They lean forward, rest their elbows on the table, or move closer to the speaker. The body moves toward the information it values. Eye behavior reveals the same pattern. When someone is truly interested, their eyes stay locked on the person speaking for longer periods of time. They are not constantly scanning the room or checking their phone. Their gaze becomes steady and attentive. You may also notice their pupils becoming slightly larger. This happens because curiosity activates parts of the brain connected to learning and reward. The body reacts by sharpening visual focus, which can cause the pupils to expand slightly. Even though this change is subtle, it reflects the brain shifting into learning mode. Facial expressions also become more animated during genuine interest. Eyebrows may lift slightly when new information appears. The head may tilt to one side as the brain processes what it is hearing. These reactions signal that the person is mentally engaging with the material, rather than simply waiting for their turn to speak. Head tilting is especially fascinating. It often appears when someone is trying to understand something more deeply. The movement slightly exposes the neck, which signals openness and trust, while the brain focuses on absorbing information. Questions are another strong indicator, but the type of question matters. When curiosity is real, people ask follow-up questions that dig deeper into the topic. Their questions build on what was just said rather than jumping randomly to something else. This shows the brain actively connecting pieces of information. You might also notice something called mirroring. When someone becomes highly engaged in a conversation, they often begin unconsciously copying small aspects of the other person's behavior. If you lean forward, they lean forward too. If you gesture with your hands, their gestures may start reflecting similar rhythms. This mirroring happens because the brain is synchronizing with the interaction. Silence can also signal curiosity. When someone pauses before responding instead of immediately jumping in, it sometimes means they are genuinely thinking about what you just said. Their brain is processing the information rather than preparing the next thing they want to talk about. In those moments, the pause reflects attention rather than disengagement. Another clue appears in distraction levels. When curiosity is low, attention drifts easily. People glance at their phone, check the time, or look around the room. But when curiosity is high, distractions fade into the background. The person stays mentally anchored in the conversation. Of course, just like every aspect of reading people, context matters. Some individuals are naturally expressive when they are interested, while others show curiosity in quieter ways. A reserved person may not lean forward dramatically, but they might still maintain strong eye contact and ask thoughtful questions. What matters most is the shift from their normal behavior. When someone becomes genuinely interested, their body often moves closer, their attention sharpens, and their reactions become more responsive to the conversation. The brain is essentially saying this matters, pay attention. And once you begin recognizing these signals of curiosity, you start seeing something fascinating during everyday interactions. True interest has a magnetic effect on the human body. People lean toward it, focus on it, and unconsciously synchronize with the person who is providing it. Defensive body language, psychological shields people use. There are moments in conversations when a person does not physically walk away, but their body quietly builds a wall. The words may continue. The discussion might even sound polite, yet something in their posture begins to close off. It is as if an invisible shield has appeared between them and the situation. This is defensive body language. When the brain senses emotional discomfort, criticism, or potential threat, it automatically looks for ways to protect the person. That protection does not always come through arguments or confrontation. More often it shows up through small physical barriers the body creates without conscious thought. One of the most common signals is the classic crossed arms posture. Many people immediately associate crossed arms with defensiveness, and sometimes that interpretation is correct. When someone folds their arms tightly across their chest during a stressful conversation, it can act like a protective barrier for the body's vital organs. The gesture literally shields the torso, which the brain instinctively protects when tension appears. But the key detail is how the arms are crossed. If the arms are relaxed and the shoulders remain loose, the person might simply be comfortable. But when the arms are pulled in tightly and the shoulders rise slightly, that tension often signals emotional protection. The body is closing off space as a way of creating safety. Another powerful defensive signal appears when people place objects between themselves and others. Imagine someone sitting at a table during a difficult discussion. They might slowly pull a laptop, notebook, or coffee cup closer to the center of their body. The object becomes a physical buffer between them and the other person. This happens because the brain feels safer when a barrier exists. Even small items can serve this purpose. Someone might hold a bag in front of their torso while standing, or keep their phone in both hands during an uncomfortable conversation. The object creates a sense of psychological distance. The body is building a shield without moving away completely. Leg positioning can show the same pattern. When people feel open and relaxed, their legs tend to remain uncrossed or loosely positioned. But when discomfort appears, the legs may cross tightly or the ankles might lock together. This creates another form of physical closure around the body. You may also notice a shift in posture. Instead of leaning forward into the conversation, the person begins leaning slightly backward or turning their torso away. The head might still face the speaker, but the rest of the body starts angling away from the interaction. It is a subtle signal that the brain wants distance. Hand behavior can reveal defensive feelings as well. Some people clasp their hands together tightly, as if holding themselves in place. Others interlock their fingers or grip their own wrist. These gestures reduce open movement and create a sense of self-containment. It is the body saying stay protected. There are also facial signals that accompany defensive states. Lips may press together, reducing emotional expression. The chin might drop slightly as the person avoids full eye contact. Eyebrows can lower or tighten briefly when a comment feels challenging. None of these reactions need to be dramatic. In fact, the most telling defensive signals are often quiet and restrained. Another interesting behavior appears when people begin nodding repeatedly without adding much verbal response. This type of nodding can sometimes act as a social shield. The person signals agreement or acknowledgement in order to avoid deeper confrontation. The nod becomes a polite barrier rather than a genuine sign of engagement. But just like every signal in reading people, context is essential. Someone might cross their arms simply because the room is cold. They might hold an object out of habit. Defensive body language only becomes meaningful when it appears suddenly during moments of emotional pressure. If a person was sitting openly during a relaxed discussion and then gradually closes their posture when a certain topic appears, that change often signals psychological discomfort. The body is reacting to the emotional environment. Defensive behavior is not always negative. In many situations, it simply means the person feels vulnerable, uncertain, or cautious. The brain is trying to protect itself from criticism, embarrassment, or conflict. In other words, the body is doing its job. Once you begin noticing these protective signals, you start realizing how often people use physical barriers instead of verbal ones. They may continue the conversation, smile politely, and respond calmly, yet their posture quietly says something different. Because when the brain senses pressure, the body often reaches for invisible shields long before the person decides to say they feel uncomfortable. Confidence indicators. How self-assured people physically behave. You can usually sense confidence in someone before they say a single word. They walk into a room, and something about their presence feels steady and grounded. It is not loud or exaggerated. In fact, real confidence is often surprisingly quiet. The body simply moves in a way that signals comfort with itself and the environment. Self-assured people do not need to prove they belong somewhere. Their body language naturally reflects that belief. One of the first things you notice is posture. Confident people tend to stand and sit with an open, balanced frame. Their shoulders rest comfortably back instead of curling forward. Their spine stays upright without looking stiff or forced. This posture is not about trying to look impressive. It happens because the body is relaxed and not bracing against social pressure. When the brain feels secure, the muscles stop protecting themselves and the body opens naturally. Movement is another powerful indicator. People who feel confident rarely rush their motions. They walk at a steady pace and take their time when entering a space. Their gestures flow smoothly rather than appearing quick or jittery. Even small movements like reaching for a glass or adjusting their position happen calmly. Confidence slows the body down. The reason is simple. When someone feels uncertain, the brain often speeds up behavior because it is trying to reduce attention or escape discomfort. But when someone feels comfortable in their position, there is no need to hurry. The body moves at its natural rhythm. Eye behavior also reveals a lot about confidence. Self-assured individuals tend to maintain balanced eye contact during conversations. They look directly at the person they are speaking with, but they do not stare intensely or avoid looking away. Their gaze moves naturally between moments of connection and brief glances elsewhere. This pattern shows that the person is comfortable being seen and comfortable observing others. Another interesting sign appears in how confident people use space. Instead of shrinking their body or trying to stay unnoticed, they allow themselves to occupy the space around them. When sitting, they settle fully into the chair rather than perching on the edge. Their arms and hands move freely when they speak. This is not about taking over the room. It is simply about not restricting their own presence. Hand gestures often reinforce this feeling. Confident people usually speak with open hand movements that match their words. Their palms may occasionally become visible as they explain something. These gestures appear natural and connected to the flow of conversation. Because the person is not worried about being judged, their hands move without hesitation. The voice also plays a role in physical confidence. When someone feels secure in what they are saying, their speech rhythm tends to remain steady. They do not rush through sentences or fill every pause with extra words. They allow moments of silence to exist without feeling pressure to immediately fill them. Pauses become part of their communication style rather than something to fear. Another subtle indicator appears in how confident people react to interruptions or disagreements. Instead of becoming visibly tense or defensive, they often remain physically composed. Their posture stays open and their gestures remain controlled. This does not mean they always agree with others. It simply means their body does not immediately shift into a protective state. The nervous system stays calm even during challenge. Breathing patterns often reflect this calmness as well. When people feel confident, their breathing remains deep and steady. The chest and shoulders do not rise sharply with each breath. Instead, the rhythm stays relaxed, which helps maintain an overall sense of composure. This calm breathing supports stable posture, voice, and movement all at once. Of course, confidence does not mean perfection. Even self-assured people experience nervous moments or uncertainty. The difference is that their baseline physical behavior usually remains open and balanced. They return to that state quickly after pressure passes. What truly defines confident body language is the absence of excessive guarding. The person is not constantly shrinking their posture, hiding their hands, or rushing their words. Their body behaves as if it belongs exactly where it is. And when you begin paying attention to these signals, you realize something interesting about how confidence is perceived. It is rarely about dominance or dramatic gestures. Most of the time, confidence simply looks like a person whose body is relaxed enough to move through the world without constantly protecting itself. Attraction signals, the small behaviors that show someone likes you. Attraction rarely begins with words. Long before someone admits they like you, their body usually starts revealing it in small, almost invisible ways. These signals are subtle, natural reactions that happen when the brain becomes emotionally and biologically interested in another person. Most people think attraction shows up through obvious flirting or compliments. But real attraction usually starts much earlier, through tiny behavioral changes that happen automatically. One of the clearest signals is proximity. When someone feels drawn to you, they often find reasons to reduce the distance between you. It might be small at first, They choose the seat closer to you instead of one farther away. During a group conversation, they slowly shift their position until they are standing nearer. The body naturally moves toward what it likes. This movement is rarely dramatic. It might be a step closer during a conversation or leaning slightly toward you while sitting. But over time, those small adjustments reveal that the person's attention is focused on you more than the rest of the room. Eye behavior is another powerful indicator. When someone feels attraction, their gaze tends to return to you repeatedly. Even in a group setting, you may notice their eyes checking back in your direction again and again. The look might last only a second before they glance away, but the pattern repeats. It is almost like their attention is magnetically pulled back. You might also notice a softer quality in their eye contact. Instead of quick or distant glances, the gaze lingers slightly longer. The person seems more visually engaged with you than with others around them. This happens because attraction activates areas of the brain connected to reward and curiosity. Facial reactions often change too. When someone likes you, their expressions become more responsive to what you say. They smile more easily. Their eyebrows lift slightly when you talk. Their face seems more animated in your presence. It is the brain reacting positively to your presence. One particularly interesting signal is mirroring. When attraction grows, people often begin unconsciously copying aspects of each other's behavior. If you lean forward, they may lean forward as well. If you laugh or gesture in a certain way, their movements may start reflecting a similar rhythm. This mirroring happens because the brain is trying to create connection. Touch can also appear in very small, casual ways. A brief touch on the arm during laughter. A light tap on the shoulder while making a point. These touches are usually quick and natural, but they signal that the person feels comfortable crossing into your personal space. Physical contact becomes a subtle way to build closeness. Another clue appears in grooming behaviors. When someone feels attracted, they often become slightly more aware of their appearance around the person they like. They might adjust their hair, smooth their clothing, or straighten their posture during conversation. These small adjustments happen because the brain wants to present the best possible image. You may also notice changes in voice and laughter. When people feel attraction, their voice often becomes warmer or more expressive. They laugh more easily, especially at things you say. Even simple comments might receive a bigger reaction than usual. The brain is signaling enjoyment of the interaction. Feet and body orientation can reveal interest as well. When someone likes you, their body tends to point toward you during conversation. Even if they are speaking to someone else, their feet or torso may remain angled in your direction. The body is quietly prioritizing your presence. Another fascinating sign is attentiveness. When attraction exists, the person often remembers small details about what you say. They ask follow-up questions. They react to things you mentioned earlier. Their attention stays focused on the conversation rather than drifting around the room. Your words carry more weight in their mind. Of course, none of these signals alone prove attraction. Someone might lean forward because they are interested in the topic. They might smile because they are naturally friendly. But when several of these behaviors appear together around you consistently, a pattern begins to form. The body keeps showing up in the same direction. Attraction is rarely announced immediately. Instead, it builds quietly through attention, proximity, mirroring, and warmth in behavior. And once you learn to recognize these small signals, you start noticing something fascinating. Long before someone says they like you, their body has usually been telling the story for quite a while. The truth about fidgeting, nervous habit, or deception. When people think about nervous behavior, one of the first things that comes to mind is fidgeting. The tapping foot, the restless hands, the constant shifting in a chair. Movies and television have trained us to believe that when someone starts fidgeting, they must be lying or hiding something. But real human behavior is much more complicated than that. Fidgeting does not automatically mean deception. In fact, many honest people fidget constantly, while some people who are hiding something can remain perfectly still. The truth is that fidgeting is usually a signal of internal energy, not necessarily dishonesty. The body simply needs a way to release pressure. When the brain experiences stress, excitement, or even boredom, the nervous system activates. That activation creates physical tension inside the body. Muscles become slightly tighter, heart rate increases, and the brain prepares the body for action. But in social situations, people cannot simply run or move freely. So the body releases that energy through small movements. This is where fidgeting appears. Someone might tap their fingers against a table, bounce their knee while sitting, adjust their clothing repeatedly, or roll a pen between their hands. These movements act like tiny pressure valves for the nervous system. They help the body burn off nervous energy. Imagine someone sitting through an important job interview. Their mind is working hard, their heart rate is slightly elevated, and they want to perform well. Their foot may begin tapping under the table, or their fingers might start playing with a ring. That behavior does not mean they are lying. It simply means their brain is operating under pressure. The same thing happens during excitement. Think about a person waiting for important news. They might pace around the room, shift their weight repeatedly, or move their hands constantly while talking. The energy inside them needs somewhere to go. Boredom can create fidgeting too. When the brain is understimulated, it sometimes seeks movement as a way to stay alert. Someone sitting through a long meeting may start spinning a pen, tapping their foot, or shifting position repeatedly. Their body is trying to stay mentally engaged. However, fidgeting can become meaningful when it appears suddenly in response to a specific topic or question. If someone has been sitting calmly during a conversation and their behavior changes the moment a certain subject appears, that shift might signal emotional pressure. The key is not the movement itself, but the timing of the movement. For example, imagine someone speaking comfortably with relaxed posture. Then a difficult question is asked, and suddenly their hands begin rubbing together while their leg starts bouncing rapidly. That combination of behaviors suggests the topic triggered stress. It still does not prove deception, but it does show that something about that moment created internal tension. There is also another interesting pattern that people often misunderstand. When someone becomes extremely focused on controlling their behavior, they may actually reduce movement instead of increasing it. Some individuals freeze their body in an attempt to appear calm and trustworthy. Their hands stop moving, their posture becomes rigid, and their gestures disappear. Ironically, that unnatural stillness can sometimes reveal just as much pressure as fidgeting does. The nervous system is still activated, but the person is forcing their body to suppress the movement. This is why experienced observers never judge a single behavior in isolation. One person's normal baseline may include constant fidgeting. Another person may rarely move at all unless they feel strong pressure. Without knowing the person's natural behavior, the signal has no clear meaning. What matters most is change. If someone who normally sits still suddenly begins tapping their fingers, shifting in their seat, and adjusting objects repeatedly, that change tells you their emotional state has shifted. The brain has moved from comfort into some level of tension. But the cause of that tension could be many things: anxiety, excitement, embarrassment, fear of judgment, or simply the pressure of being observed. Fidgeting is not a lie detector. It is a window into the nervous system. And once you start looking at it that way, those small restless movements stop being suspicious habits and start becoming clues about how much pressure someone might be carrying in that moment. Vocal hesitation. What fillers like and ook actually mean. Listen carefully during a conversation, and you will notice something interesting about how people speak. Very few sentences come out perfectly smooth. Instead, you often hear small filler sounds appear in the middle of thoughts. Words like or short pauses that stretch slightly longer than expected. Most people assume these sounds are simply signs of nervousness or poor speaking skills. But in reality, vocal hesitation reveals something much more fascinating about how the human brain processes information. When someone says or their mind is usually doing one thing. It is buying time. Speech moves quickly, but thinking does not always keep up with that speed. As people talk, their brain constantly searches for the next word, the next idea, or the safest way to phrase something. When the brain needs an extra moment to organize those thoughts, a filler sound often slips in. It is the mind pressing pause without actually stopping the conversation. Imagine asking someone a simple question. They immediately begin answering, but halfway through the sentence they say, while their brain finishes constructing the rest of the thought. That sound allows them to keep the floor in the conversation while their mind catches up. Without it, they would have to stop speaking completely. This is why fillers are extremely common when people are explaining complex ideas. Their brain is working hard to organize information while they speak. The fillers create small bridges between thoughts. They give the mind breathing room. However, vocal hesitation can reveal emotional pressure as well. When someone feels nervous, uncertain, or worried about how their words will be received, their brain becomes more cautious. Instead of letting sentences flow automatically, it begins monitoring each word more carefully. That extra mental monitoring slows down speech production. As a result, fillers may appear more frequently. Someone might say or several times while explaining something sensitive. Each filler represents the brain pausing briefly to evaluate what should come next. It is like a tiny checkpoint before the next sentence. This does not mean the person is lying. It simply means the topic requires more careful thinking. The brain is managing risk while speaking. Another interesting place where vocal hesitation appears is during memory recall. When someone tries to remember details from the past, their mind searches through stored information. During that search process, the voice may slow down and fillers may appear. You might hear someone say something like, let me think for a second, while their brain scans through memory. The filler becomes a signal that the mind is actively retrieving information. There is also a social reason these sounds exist. Conversations have a natural rhythm where people take turns speaking. If someone stops talking completely, another person may jump in and take the turn. Fillers help prevent that. By saying or the speaker signals that they are not finished yet. They are still holding the conversational space while preparing the next thought. It is a subtle way of keeping control of the floor. But just like every behavior in reading people, the most important factor is change. Some people naturally use fillers often, especially if they think out loud while speaking. Others speak very smoothly most of the time. The baseline matters. If someone who normally speaks clearly and quickly suddenly begins using several fillers during a particular question, that shift can reveal that the topic created pressure or uncertainty. Their brain has moved from automatic speech into careful construction. You might also notice the opposite reaction. Some people slow down and pause silently instead of using fillers when they feel pressure. Their speech becomes more deliberate as they choose each word carefully. Different minds handle hesitation differently. Another detail worth watching is where the fillers appear in a sentence. When fillers appear before answering a question, it often means the person is thinking about the response itself. When they appear in the middle of a sentence, it usually means the brain is searching for the next piece of information. These patterns reveal the timing of thought. In the end, vocal hesitation is not a flaw in communication. It is a reflection of the brain working in real time. Every or is a tiny signal that thinking is happening right beneath the surface of speech. And when you start paying attention to when those sounds appear and what topics trigger them, you begin hearing conversations in a completely different way, because those small pauses often reveal exactly when the mind slows down to think before it speaks. Mirroring behavior. When someone subconsciously copies you during certain conversations, something interesting begins to happen without either person noticing it. Movements start lining up, posture becomes similar. Even the rhythm of speech begins to match. It almost looks choreographed, but no one planned it. This is called mirroring. Mirroring happens when one person subconsciously copies the behavior, posture, or gestures of another person. It is one of the clearest signals that connection, comfort, or rapport is forming between two people. The fascinating part is that it usually happens automatically. The human brain contains systems designed to synchronize with others. When we feel comfortable around someone, our brain naturally begins aligning our behavior with theirs. It is almost like the nervous system is saying we are on the same wavelength. This alignment can show up in many small ways. Imagine you are sitting across from someone during a conversation. At first, both of you are simply talking. Then you lean forward slightly while explaining something. A few seconds later, the other person leans forward too. Neither of you consciously decided to copy the movement. It simply happened. This is mirroring in action. The same thing can happen with hand gestures. If you begin using your hands more while speaking, the other person may start gesturing more as well. Their movements gradually begin reflecting the energy and rhythm of yours. Even posture can synchronize. If you cross one leg over the other while sitting, the person across from you might shift into a similar position shortly afterward. Again, they are not doing it deliberately. Their brain is simply aligning with the interaction. Mirroring often appears strongest when two people are enjoying the conversation. The more comfortable and engaged they feel, the more likely their behaviors will begin matching each other. It is a physical sign that both nervous systems are relaxed and connected. Speech patterns can mirror as well. During engaging conversations, people sometimes begin matching each other's speaking pace or tone. If one person slows down, the other may slow down too. If one person becomes more animated, the energy can spread through the interaction. The conversation starts flowing in a shared rhythm. Laughter is another powerful example. When one person laughs genuinely, the other often laughs as well, even if the joke was only mildly funny. The brain reacts to the emotional signal and reflects it back. This emotional echo strengthens social bonds. One of the most interesting details about mirroring is the timing. True subconscious mirroring usually happens with a slight delay. If someone copies a movement instantly, it may look unnatural or intentional. But when the same movement appears a few seconds later, it often means the brain absorbed the signal and reproduced it without conscious thought. That delay is what makes it authentic. Mirroring can also reveal who feels more socially comfortable in the interaction. Often one person becomes the natural leader of the conversation, while the other subtly mirrors their behavior. The follower's body adapts to the leader's movements. However, the roles can switch as the interaction evolves. In strong connections, both people eventually begin mirroring each other in different moments. It becomes a shared loop of influence rather than a one-sided pattern. Of course, context always matters. Some people are naturally expressive and move frequently, while others remain still during conversation. But when you start noticing repeated similarities in posture, gestures, and rhythm between two people, it usually signals a deeper level of comfort. The nervous systems are sensing. Mirroring also explains why certain conversations feel effortless while others feel awkward. When people are aligned emotionally, their bodies move together in subtle ways. When that alignment is missing, movements stay disconnected and the interaction can feel strained. The body quietly reflects the quality of the connection. Once you start paying attention to mirroring, you begin seeing it everywhere. Friends sitting with similar posture. Couples walking in step with each other. Colleagues leaning forward at the same moment during an engaging discussion. These small behavioral echoes reveal something important. Human beings are wired to connect by synchronizing with one another. And when someone's body begins quietly copying your movements, it often means their mind and attention are deeply engaged with you in that moment. The speed of response. What delayed answers reveal? Pay attention to how quickly someone answers a question, and you will start noticing a hidden layer of communication that most people completely overlook. The timing of a response can reveal what is happening inside the mind before the words even appear. Conversations usually follow a natural rhythm. One person finishes speaking and the other responds almost immediately. The pause between those two moments is normally very short, often less than a second. The brain processes the question, retrieves the answer, and speech begins. But when that rhythm suddenly changes, it can signal that something interesting is happening beneath the surface. A delayed response often means the brain needs extra time to process the situation. Sometimes that delay appears because the person is searching their memory. If you ask someone what they did last weekend, they might pause briefly while their mind scans through recent events. That pause is the brain retrieving information. You can often see this process happening in real time. The person may look slightly upward or away for a moment as if their mind is flipping through mental snapshots. Once the memory appears, the answer flows naturally. This type of delay is completely normal. However, delays can also appear when the brain is evaluating how to respond rather than simply recalling information. If a question touches on something sensitive, embarrassing, or complicated, the mind may pause longer while deciding what to say. In those moments, The brain is not just searching for facts. It is calculating consequences. Imagine asking someone a direct question about a mistake or a difficult situation. Instead of answering quickly, they hesitate. Their silence lasts a few seconds longer than expected. During that pause, their brain may be weighing different options for how to respond. The delay becomes a window into the thinking process. Sometimes the person is choosing the most careful wording. They may want to avoid saying something that could create conflict or misunderstanding. The extra time allows them to shape the response more precisely. Other times the mind is constructing an explanation rather than recalling one. When people remember real events, the information usually appears relatively quickly because it already exists in memory. But when someone needs to build a story on the spot, the brain must create details, organize them logically, and then deliver them through speech. That process naturally takes more time. This does not automatically mean someone is lying. There are many reasons a person might slow down before answering. They might feel nervous, unsure, or simply thoughtful. Some individuals naturally prefer to think carefully before speaking. Their baseline response time is longer than others. What makes response timing meaningful is change. If someone normally answers questions quickly, but suddenly pauses for several seconds during a particular topic, that shift can signal that the subject triggered extra mental processing. The brain moved from automatic answering into deliberate thinking. You might also notice physical signals during these pauses. The person may inhale slowly, look away, or briefly press their lips together while their mind organizes the response. These small behaviors reflect the mental effort happening behind the silence. The opposite pattern can also reveal something interesting. Occasionally, a response arrives almost too quickly, as if the answer was prepared before the question finished. This can happen when someone has already anticipated the topic or rehearsed what they plan to say. The words appear immediately because the brain already prepared them. In other situations, quick responses simply reflect strong confidence or familiarity with the subject. Someone who knows exactly what they think will answer without hesitation. Again, context matters. Human conversations are full of these timing clues. The speed of a response often reflects whether the brain is recalling, evaluating, constructing, or protecting information. Once you begin paying attention to these small pauses, conversations start revealing a deeper rhythm. The silence between question and answer becomes just as meaningful as the words themselves, because that quiet moment is where the mind decides what the world will hear next. Facial asymmetry. When only half the face tells the truth, look closely at someone's face the next time they react to something emotional. Not the whole face, just one side of it, because something strange happens during real human emotion. The two sides of the face do not always tell the same story. Most people assume facial expressions appear evenly across the face. A smile is a smile. Anger looks symmetrical. Sadness shows up everywhere at once. But the human brain does not actually work that way. In reality, emotions often leak out unevenly, creating tiny differences between the left and right sides of the face. And those differences can quietly expose what someone truly feels. Think about the last time you saw someone give a smile that felt slightly off. Not obviously fake, just a little uneven. One side of the mouth lifted higher than the other. One eye seemed engaged, while the other looked distant. Your brain probably picked up on that instantly. It is not imagination. The human brain is incredibly sensitive to facial symmetry, especially when it comes to emotional expressions. When someone genuinely feels something, the muscles across their face tend to activate together in a balanced way. But when someone is controlling their expression or masking emotion, the muscles often activate unevenly. One side of the face might reveal the truth, while the other side performs the act. This happens because emotional expression is deeply connected to how the brain processes feelings. The right hemisphere of the brain plays a major role in emotional processing, and it controls the muscles on the left side of the face. Because of this connection, genuine emotion often appears slightly stronger on the left side of the face. That side reacts more honestly and more automatically. The other side of the face is often more influenced by conscious control. When someone tries to manage their expression, the control usually shows up more strongly on the right side of their face. This creates a subtle imbalance. Imagine someone hearing good news they did not expect. Their smile appears suddenly and spreads across both sides of the face almost instantly. The cheeks lift. The eyes narrow naturally. Everything looks balanced because the emotion arrived faster than conscious control. Now picture someone pretending to be happy about something they secretly dislike. They might lift the corners of their mouth, but the expression appears slightly uneven. One side moves more than the other. The eyes do not fully participate. The face looks like it is half convinced. That is facial asymmetry revealing emotional conflict. Another common example appears during forced politeness. Someone might smile during a conversation even though they feel annoyed or uncomfortable. The smile shows up, but it lacks balance. One side of the mouth lifts while the other barely moves. Sometimes the expression disappears faster on one side as well. These small imbalances often last only a fraction of a second, but the brain is remarkably good at detecting them, even when people cannot explain why something feels off. They still sense that the expression was not completely genuine. The face leaked a different story. Facial asymmetry can also appear during suppressed emotions. When someone tries to hide irritation, frustration, or disbelief, the controlled side of the face attempts to remain neutral. Meanwhile, the emotional side may briefly tighten, twitch, or react before control returns. That tiny flicker can reveal the internal reaction. This is why certain reactions feel confusing. Someone may say they are fine, yet something about their face makes you question it. Maybe one eyebrow tightened slightly. Maybe one side of their mouth pulled downward for a moment before returning to neutral. Your brain notices these imbalances even if your conscious mind cannot immediately explain them. It is important to remember that asymmetry alone does not prove deception. Faces naturally vary, and people have different muscle patterns. Some individuals naturally smile unevenly or raise one eyebrow more than the other. What matters is the change. When a normally balanced face suddenly shows uneven emotion during a specific moment or topic, that shift can reveal internal tension. The person may be experiencing mixed emotions or trying to control how they appear. Their face briefly splits between honesty and control. Once you start watching for this, facial expressions become much more revealing. Instead of seeing a single expression, you begin noticing two versions happening at once. One side shaped by genuine feeling, the other shaped by social performance. And sometimes, for just a split second, the honest side speaks louder. The subconscious touch, why people touch their face or neck. Watch what someone does with their hands when the conversation gets uncomfortable. Not the words they say, not the expression they try to hold, just the hands. because in tense or emotional moments, the hands almost always travel to the same places: the face, the neck, the mouth, the jaw, and most people have no idea they are doing it. A person might be speaking normally, answering questions, explaining something, and suddenly their fingers move to their lips, or they rub the side of their neck, or they press their palm against their forehead for a brief moment before continuing to talk. These touches seem small, almost meaningless, but they are rarely random. When people experience internal stress, uncertainty, embarrassment, or pressure, the body tries to calm itself automatically. The nervous system looks for ways to reduce that tension. One of the fastest ways the body does this is through physical self-contact. In psychology, this behavior is often called self-soothing. The skin contains thousands of nerve endings that send calming signals to the brain when touched. So when stress rises, the body instinctively tries to regulate itself by creating that contact. That is why people rub their temples when thinking hard, why someone might press their fingers against their lips during an awkward pause, why a person might gently touch the side of their neck when they feel exposed in a conversation. The touch itself is a quiet attempt to settle the nervous system. Think about a moment when someone asks a difficult question. For a brief second, the person pauses. Their hand moves up and covers part of their mouth while they think. They may not even realize they did it, but their brain is trying to create a barrier. Touching the mouth often appears when someone feels uncertain about what they are saying or about what they should say next. The gesture can act almost like a subconscious pause button while the brain processes the situation. It is not always about deception. Sometimes it simply reflects hesitation or careful thinking. Neck touching tells another interesting story. The neck is one of the most vulnerable areas of the human body. Major arteries run through it, and the brain is extremely protective of that region. When someone touches or rubs their neck during conversation, it often signals discomfort or emotional tension. You might see someone lightly scratching the side of their neck while answering a personal question, or a person may adjust their collar repeatedly during a stressful moment. The body is releasing pressure. Another common signal appears around the jaw and chin. People often rub their jawline or rest their hand against their chin when they are processing something complicated. This gesture is partly thoughtful and partly soothing. The contact helps stabilize the mind while it works through information. Even touching the face in general can reveal emotional pressure. Rubbing the forehead, pressing the cheeks, or briefly covering the eyes are all ways the brain attempts to slow things down internally. It is like the body creating a momentary shield. What makes these touches interesting is their timing. They often appear right after a difficult question, during moments of uncertainty, or while someone is trying to manage their emotional reaction. The hands move before the person even realizes the stress is showing. However, context always matters. Some people naturally touch their face more than others. It can be a habit, especially during thinking. That is why observing patterns is more important than focusing on a single movement. If someone suddenly begins touching their neck or mouth more frequently during a certain topic, that shift can signal rising internal pressure. The body is trying to regulate itself. Another subtle detail is the speed of the gesture. Self-soothing touches tend to be gentle and repetitive. A slow rub of the neck, a light press of the lips, fingers brushing the cheek. These movements are not aggressive, they are calming. Once you begin noticing these signals, Conversations become much more revealing. Words might sound confident and controlled, but the hands sometimes tell a quieter story. A story about stress, uncertainty, or emotional weight building beneath the surface. Because when pressure rises inside the mind, the body almost always reaches for itself first. Group dynamics. Reading people. When they're with others, a person can seem completely different when they are alone with you compared to when they are surrounded by other people. The voice changes. The posture changes. Even the confidence level can shift. And if you only study someone one-on-one, you are only seeing a small piece of who they are. The real story often appears when people interact inside a group. Groups create a completely different psychological environment. Instead of one conversation, there are multiple social forces happening at the same time. People become aware of status, approval, attention, and influence. Their behavior adjusts to the invisible structure forming in the room, and that structure reveals a lot about everyone involved. One of the first things to watch is where attention flows. In most groups, attention naturally gravitates toward one or two individuals. These people may not be the loudest, but others often look toward them before speaking or reacting. You might notice someone telling a story and briefly glancing at a certain person to see their reaction. Or when a joke lands, several people turn toward the same individual to see if they laugh. That person often holds subtle social influence within the group. Influence does not always mean authority. Sometimes it is simply the person whose approval carries weight. When they nod, others relax. When they remain silent, the room hesitates. Watching where people look during conversations can quietly reveal this dynamic. Another revealing pattern is how people position their bodies. In group settings, our bodies often angle toward the individuals we feel most comfortable with or most interested in. Even when standing in a circle, you will often see small shifts. Two people may turn slightly toward each other, while the rest of the group remains more open. Their feet point inward. Their shoulders align. This creates a mini connection inside the larger conversation. It signals where real engagement exists. You can also learn a lot by observing who interrupts and who gets interrupted. In balanced groups, people tend to allow each other space to speak. But when there is a clear social hierarchy, certain individuals speak more freely while others hesitate or wait longer for their turn. If someone begins talking and others consistently stop to listen, that person likely carries higher status in the group. But if someone speaks and people talk over them or shift attention elsewhere, the group may unconsciously place them lower in the social order. Laughter is another powerful clue. Notice who people laugh with and who they laugh for. Sometimes a joke is told and everyone laughs immediately. But other times, laughter begins only after a specific person reacts. That moment reveals whose emotional response guides the group. People often follow the emotional cues of the most influential member. Group dynamics also expose alliances. Friends inside a group often share small signals with each other. Quick glances, inside jokes, subtle nods. They might lean slightly closer together or respond faster to each other's comments. These signals form invisible threads connecting certain people more strongly than others. Another interesting moment happens when disagreement appears. In group conversations, people rarely respond to disagreement purely based on logic. Instead, many individuals first observe how others react before choosing their own response. Someone might pause after hearing a controversial opinion and quickly scan the room. Their eyes search for reactions from others before they decide whether to agree, challenge, or stay quiet. This brief scan reveals how strongly people care about social alignment. Confidence also behaves differently in groups. Some individuals become more expressive and energetic when others are around. They gesture more, speak louder, and naturally command attention. Others shrink slightly. Their posture tightens. Their voice becomes softer. Neither reaction is fake. They simply reveal how comfortable someone feels within that social environment. Perhaps the most interesting moments appear when the group leader changes. If the most influential person leaves the conversation, watch what happens next. Often another individual slowly steps forward. Their voice becomes stronger. Their posture opens. Others begin looking toward them instead. Leadership shifts quietly, without anyone announcing it. Once you begin observing these patterns, groups start to look very different. Instead of random conversations, you see networks of influence, comfort, and silent negotiation happening beneath the surface. People reveal not only who they are, but who they become when others are watching. And sometimes, the version of someone that appears in a group setting tells you more about them than anything they say when they are alone. Power postures, how authority shows up in body language. A walk into a room where two people are talking, and within seconds you can usually sense who holds the power. No introductions. No job titles. No explanations. Something about the way one person sits or stands immediately signals authority. It is not magic. It is posture. The human brain is extremely sensitive to spatial signals. Long before words are spoken, we instinctively read how much space someone takes up, how relaxed their body appears, and how comfortable they seem being observed. Authority often shows up through expansion. People who feel confident or powerful tend to occupy more physical space without even thinking about it. Their shoulders stay open. Their arms move freely. Their posture spreads outward instead of folding inward. They look physically comfortable existing in the environment. Imagine someone sitting at a table during a meeting. One person sits with their back straight, shoulders relaxed, arms resting naturally on the table or chair. Their movements are slow and deliberate. They do not rush when speaking. Another person sits tightly. Their elbows stay close to their body. Their shoulders lift slightly toward their ears. Their movements are quicker and more restrained. Even without hearing the conversation, most people instinctively assume the first person holds more authority. The body is communicating status through space. Standing posture reveals the same pattern. Individuals who feel powerful often stand with balanced weight, feet planted firmly, and chest open. Their head remains level. They rarely fidget or shrink their frame. The posture quietly says, "I belong here." On the other hand, when someone feels uncertain or lower in status, the body often tries to reduce its presence. Shoulders roll forward slightly. Arms cross or tuck close to the torso. The head may tilt downward, or the body leans away from the center of attention. It is a subconscious attempt to appear smaller and less exposed. Another strong signal of authority is stillness. Many people assume powerful individuals move more, but the opposite is often true. People who feel secure in their position tend to move less and speak at a steady pace. Their calmness creates gravity. When someone holds eye contact comfortably, pauses before answering, and allows silence to exist without rushing to fill it, they project a sense of control over the interaction. The room adjusts to their rhythm. Gestures also reveal authority. Confident individuals tend to use open hand movements rather than closed or hidden gestures. Their palms may face upward or outward while speaking, which signals transparency and ease. The arms move away from the body rather than protecting it. These movements unconsciously communicate that the person does not feel threatened by the environment around them. Seated posture during conversations provides even more clues. People who feel dominant often lean back slightly while listening. Their body language suggests they are comfortable evaluating the conversation rather than chasing approval. Meanwhile, individuals seeking validation often lean forward more frequently, nod quickly, or react immediately to what others say. Neither posture is good or bad. They simply reflect different psychological positions in the moment. Another fascinating signal is how people claim territory. Someone who feels powerful may place objects around them more freely. A notebook on one side of the table, a phone on the other, an arm resting across the back of a chair. They expand their presence into the surrounding space. Someone who feels less certain may keep all their belongings neatly contained in a small area, almost as if trying not to disturb the environment. Even walking style can reveal authority. People who feel confident tend to walk at a steady pace with relaxed arms and stable posture. Their movements are efficient but unhurried. They are not rushing to prove they belong. But it is important to understand that power posture is not always about real authority. Sometimes it reflects internal confidence rather than external rank. A person without formal status can still project strong presence through how they carry themselves. And occasionally someone with high authority may intentionally reduce their posture to appear approachable. Context always matters. What makes these signals powerful is how quickly our brains process them. Within seconds of seeing someone, we begin forming impressions about their confidence, influence, and comfort level. Much of that judgment comes from posture before a single word is spoken. The body quietly announces how someone sees their place in the room, and often, everyone else begins responding to that signal without even realizing it. Conversation control. Who really holds the social power? In almost every conversation, there is an invisible tug of war happening beneath the surface. It is not about who talks the loudest or who tells the best stories. The real question is much simpler and much more revealing. Who controls the direction of the conversation? Because the person who quietly guides where the conversation goes often holds more social power than anyone else in the room. Most people think power in conversation belongs to the person speaking the most. But if you watch closely, that is rarely true. In fact, the person talking constantly is often reacting rather than leading. The real control belongs to the person who decides what gets talked about next. Imagine two people speaking. One person shares a story. The other listens, nods, and then asks a question that slightly shifts the topic. Suddenly the conversation moves in a new direction. That shift may feel natural, but it reveals something important. The person who introduced the new direction just influenced the flow of the interaction. They quietly steered the conversation. This type of control often shows up through questions. People who ask thoughtful or well-timed questions can guide conversations without dominating them. Each question acts like a steering wheel, gently redirecting attention. A simple question can change the entire subject in seconds. For example, someone might say they had a stressful week at work. The other person could respond by asking what part of the week was the hardest. Now the conversation focuses on a specific moment. Or they could ask how long that stress has been building. Now the discussion shifts toward a larger story about work or personal pressure. The person asking the question just chose the road the conversation travels. Another sign of conversational power is topic initiation. When someone introduces a new subject and others follow it, that person temporarily holds influence over the group's attention. You might notice someone say something like that, "Reminds me of something interesting I heard earlier." If the room immediately listens and the topic changes, that person successfully redirected the group. Their voice shaped the direction of the moment. Interruptions can also reveal social power, but not in the way people expect. Anyone can interrupt, but the real signal is what happens after the interruption. If someone cuts in and the group naturally shifts attention toward them, their influence is high. If they interrupt and people continue the original conversation, their influence is weaker. The response of the group reveals who truly holds weight. Silence can play an unexpected role here as well. People with strong social presence often feel comfortable letting pauses exist. They do not rush to fill every quiet moment. Instead, others often start speaking to fill that space. Ironically, silence can pull the conversation toward them. Another fascinating signal appears when someone attempts to change the subject. Watch what happens when a person tries to redirect a conversation that is already flowing. If the group follows that shift easily, the person has conversational influence. If the attempt fails and the group continues the original topic, the person's social pull may be weaker. Conversation behaves almost like gravity. People naturally orbit around voices they respect, trust, or find engaging. That gravitational pull determines whose ideas move the discussion forward and whose words simply pass through it. Tone and pacing also contribute to this dynamic. Individuals who speak calmly and deliberately often command more attention than those who rush their words. When someone speaks slowly and others pause to listen, the rhythm of the conversation begins to revolve around them. They control the tempo. What makes this dynamic so interesting is that it often happens without conscious awareness. Most people are not deliberately trying to control conversations. They are simply responding to confidence, clarity, and emotional presence. The group naturally follows certain signals. Once you start observing conversations through this lens, the structure becomes much clearer. You begin noticing who introduces topics, who redirects them, and whose words create new branches in the discussion. It becomes obvious who is reacting and who is steering. Because real social power in conversation is rarely loud or dramatic. It shows up in the quiet ability to guide where everyone's attention goes next. Cultural differences in reading body language. Imagine watching two people meet for the first time. One steps forward confidently, maintains strong eye contact, and speaks with animated hand gestures. In some places, that behavior signals confidence and friendliness. In other places, the exact same behavior could feel aggressive, disrespectful, or even rude. This is the hidden challenge of reading people. Body language feels universal because it comes from human biology, but culture quietly shapes how those signals are expressed and interpreted. The same gesture can carry completely different meanings depending on where someone grew up and what social rules they learned. Without understanding those cultural layers, it is surprisingly easy to misread someone. Take eye contact, for example. In many Western environments, steady eye contact signals confidence, honesty, and engagement. When someone avoids eye contact in those cultures, people may assume the person is nervous, hiding something, or lacking confidence. But in several Asian cultures, prolonged eye contact with someone older or higher in status can be considered disrespectful. Looking slightly downward or away can actually signal politeness and humility. The exact same behavior tells two completely different stories depending on cultural context. Personal space works the same way. In some cultures, conversations naturally happen at closer distances. People stand near each other, touch casually during conversation, and move within each other's space without discomfort. In other cultures, personal space is treated very differently. Standing too close may feel intrusive or threatening. So if someone steps back during conversation, it may not mean they dislike you. It might simply reflect the spatial norms they grew up with. Hand gestures also carry powerful cultural variations. In certain parts of the world, expressive hand movements are a normal part of speaking. Conversations become animated and physical, with gestures emphasizing emotion and storytelling. In more reserved cultures, those same gestures may appear overly dramatic or distracting. Even something as simple as nodding can create confusion. In many places, nodding signals agreement or understanding. But in some regions, similar head movements may indicate something entirely different. A small misunderstanding can happen without anyone realizing why. Facial expressions can vary as well. Some cultures encourage open emotional expression, where smiles, laughter, and visible reactions are common even in professional environments. Other cultures value emotional restraint. People may maintain more neutral facial expressions in public settings, especially around strangers or authority figures. A neutral expression in that context does not mean the person feels nothing. It simply reflects cultural training about when and how emotion should be displayed. Touch is another area where cultural differences become very clear. In some societies, friendly touches on the arm or shoulder during conversation are normal signs of warmth and connection. In other cultures, physical contact is reserved for close family or romantic partners. If someone avoids touch, it may reflect respect for boundaries rather than emotional distance. Even posture can carry cultural meaning. In certain environments, sitting casually with one leg crossed over the other may feel completely normal. In others, that posture could be interpreted as disrespectful, especially in formal situations. The body follows social rules learned over years of observation and experience. This does not mean body language becomes impossible to read across cultures. Many signals still come from universal human psychology. Genuine smiles activate muscles around the eyes everywhere in the world. Sudden fear, surprise, or anger still trigger instinctive reactions. Human biology still speaks. The key difference is that cultural context shapes how much people control, hide, or express those reactions in public. When reading people from different backgrounds, curiosity becomes more important than quick judgment. Instead of assuming a behavior means something negative, it helps to ask a simple internal question. Is this discomfort, or is this cultural difference? Often the answer becomes clearer by observing patterns over time. If someone behaves consistently in a certain way across different situations, it likely reflects cultural norms rather than emotional signals. Once you understand this layer, people become easier to read rather than harder. Because the goal is not just to watch the body, it is to understand the invisible social rules that taught that body how to move. Why you sometimes misread people's and how to avoid it. You have probably had a moment where you were absolutely sure you understood someone's behavior, only to realize later that you completely misread the situation. Maybe someone seemed cold, but they were actually nervous. Maybe someone looked guilty, but they were simply under pressure. Or maybe a friendly smile turned out to be polite rather than genuine. Reading people feels powerful, but it is also incredibly easy to get wrong. The reason is simple. Human behavior is complex, and our brains are constantly trying to interpret it quickly. Instead of analyzing every signal carefully, the brain often fills in missing information using assumptions, past experiences, and emotional shortcuts. Those shortcuts help us move fast, but they also create mistakes. One of the biggest reasons people misread others is projection. This happens when we assume someone else is feeling the same way we would feel in their situation. If you would be nervous during a certain moment, you might assume another person's nervous behavior means the same thing, but their internal experience may be completely different. For example, someone might avoid eye contact during a conversation. One observer might interpret that as dishonesty. Another might see it as shyness. In reality, the person could simply be tired, distracted, or culturally conditioned to avoid strong eye contact. The behavior is real, but the meaning behind it is not always obvious. Another common mistake comes from focusing on a single signal instead of the full picture. People often believe one gesture reveals the truth. A crossed arm means someone is defensive. A pause before answering means someone is hiding something. But body language rarely works that way. Crossed arms might signal discomfort, but they can also mean the person is cold or simply resting their arms. A delayed answer might reflect careful thinking rather than deception. One signal alone is rarely enough. Human behavior is more like a pattern than a single clue. Real understanding usually comes from noticing clusters of signals that appear together. Changes in posture, voice tone, facial expression, and timing all working in the same direction create a clearer picture. Context is another critical piece that people often ignore. Imagine someone looking serious and quiet during a meeting. Without context, it might seem like they are annoyed or disengaged. But maybe they just received stressful news earlier that day. Maybe they are concentrating deeply on the topic. The behavior makes sense once the full situation is understood. Stress also plays a huge role in misreading people. When someone is under pressure, their body can display signals that look similar to deception or hostility. Fidgeting, avoiding eye contact, touching the face, or speaking quickly can all appear during stress. But stress does not always mean someone is hiding something. It often means they simply feel overwhelmed in the moment. Another reason misreading happens is expectation. If we already believe someone is dishonest, rude, or untrustworthy, our brain begins searching for behaviors that confirm that belief. Even neutral actions may start looking suspicious. This is called confirmation bias. The mind starts collecting evidence that supports the story it already decided to believe. Avoiding these mistakes requires slowing down your interpretation process. Instead of jumping to a quick conclusion, treat behavior as information rather than proof. Notice patterns. Observe changes. Pay attention to what happens before and after certain signals appear. Baseline behavior becomes extremely important here. When you understand how someone normally acts, you can detect meaningful shifts in their behavior. Without that baseline, it is easy to mistake normal habits for emotional signals. Curiosity is far more reliable than certainty. Instead of assuming you know what someone feels, stay open to multiple explanations. Ask questions when appropriate. Observe how behavior evolves across different situations. Over time, the picture becomes clearer. Reading people is not about instantly decoding every gesture. It is about understanding that behavior is influenced by emotion, context, personality, culture, and countless hidden factors. When you approach it with patience rather than judgment, the signals become easier to understand. And the biggest secret of all is this: the people who are best at reading others are usually the ones who know how often first impressions can be wrong.